As the saying goes, don't mess with Texas. Did you know that the Texas State Legislature has proposed legislation that will begin to rein in the bloated, overreaching federal government? We'll explain more in this episode of Analysis Behind the News, where we provide the perspective that you can use to save American liberty and independence. TheNewAmerican.com recently published an article by attorney Joe Wolverton about a bill that would create a committee to review the constitutionality of federal laws, regulations, executive orders, federal court decisions, and treaties. This bold move would create the Joint Legislative Committee on Constitutional Enforcement. According to the article, quote, the 12-person committee would review federal actions that challenge the sovereignty of the state and of the people for the purpose of determining if the federal action is unconstitutional. The first few paragraphs of the bill lay out a historically correct description of the manner in which the federal government was created, including the purpose for its creation. Put simply, the states created the federal government, set the boundaries of its power, and reserved to themselves all other rights not specifically delegated to the new federal authority. The contract containing the rights and responsibilities of the parties to this contract that created the federal government is called the Constitution. This act of collective consenting is called a compact. This element of the creation of the Union is precisely where the states derive their power to negate acts of the federal government that exceed its constitutional authority. It is a thread woven inextricably in every strand of sovereignty. It was the sovereign states that provisionally ceded the territory of authority that the federal government occupies at the pleasure of the states. So here's how it works. Every state legislator takes an oath to support the Constitution as required by Article 6, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution. This clause places all state legislators under a legally binding obligation to ignore or nullify acts of the federal government that are not within its constitutional limitations. In fact, it was Thomas Jefferson who stated that nullification is the rightful remedy when government assumes undelegated powers. The father of the Constitution, James Madison, agreed and said that states were duty-bound to resist violations of the Constitution. As Mr. Wolverton wrote, quote, there is no better way for these elected state representatives of the people to show support for the Constitution than by demanding that the officers of the federal government adhere to constitutional limits on their power. Folks, this is exactly the kind of activity at the state level that we have been encouraging with our Rein in Big Government with Article 6 Action Project. This bill in Texas would formalize the nullification procedure so that unconstitutional actions will be declared unconstitutional. According to a grassroots organization called Texas Constitutional Enforcement, once declared unconstitutional, quote, law enforcement can arrest and prosecute federal agents who attempt enforcement action of the unconstitutional act while maintaining the ability of local, district, and county attorneys to prosecute. The Attorney General is also given power to prosecute federal agents. It's as effective as it is simple, and Texas Constitutional Enforcement summed it up perfectly. Quote, they wrote, this approach relies completely on Texans and Texas officials to secure the liberty of Texans and can be implemented immediately. No relying upon or waiting on other states to secure our liberty. The beauty behind this is that this method will work for every state. If you have been looking for the perfect solution to restrain the federal government without changing and potentially compromising the Constitution, then look no further. Print this New American article and sit down with like-minded state legislators to explore the possibilities of pushing this in your state. Don't get discouraged. It may take some time to build support. You can also use additional tools we have available to help build a basic understanding of how nullification would work. Just visit jbs.org/6not5. Then consider joining other patriots at the John Birch Society as we work to achieve less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world.